Welcome back, everyone. All right, our final sprint before we get to have a little disco nap and tuck in for the dinner and celebration tonight. So I'll ask everyone to come in. Please have a seat as we welcome Camille Raymond, who is the head of monitoring and evaluation at the OECD, who's going to be talking about their journey and their winning case study that we have. Camille, please join us.
Hello, everyone, and thanks a lot for welcoming me on stage. And I'm also the co-chair of AMEC non-for-profit group, and so I'm going to take you on our journey towards impact measurement. So first, the OECD, I don't know if many of you know who or what is the OECD, and it's first an acronym, so it's never easy to grasp. And so it stands for Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. And it started right after World War II to run the Marshall Plan to reconstruct Europe. So first it was really US and Europe. And since then, it has evolved. It has now 38 member countries who represent 80% of world trade and investment. And basically, it collects data, analyzes them for their members, and develop evidence-based policies. So OECD agreements which result in standard settings, cross-border cooperation in several themes. It can go from economy to environment, employment, education, trade, agriculture, and inclusion and diversity, which from this picture has come a long way. So you might have heard of us maybe last year with the corporate tax agreement. And we also published some PISA rankings on education to see the level of students across the world and their capabilities, and try to leverage, if one country's managed to have very high mathematics capabilities, we look at how they did that, and we share best practices. So our mission is better policies for better lives. And so we are a non-for-profit organization, so success for us is policy impact. And so we are missing some key indicators that some of you can track, like sales, business indicators. And we also have to spend very wisely our resources because we are funded by our members, so it's basically citizens' money in the end. So there is no paid campaign, and we need to manage to target policymakers. And I would say that sometimes we feel very small compared to other budgets. I took the recent data in 2020. You can see that some industries spend 300 million on lobbying, and we don't have any funds for that. So that's the story of how David can beat Goliath thanks to impact measurement. So when we started, first we started by clarifying what external communication can and cannot do. We cannot do policy impact on our own. We were a newly formed team. We were created just 4 years ago. And so we started with the AMEC framework. And we said, okay, how can we derive from this framework what communication role will be for the OECD? And so, as I said, communication is not delivering policy impact by itself, but it can provide an enabling environment to maximize policy impact. And so we had also to educate all the teams and colleagues about, the different metrics, and also the glossary, difference between input, output, outcomes, and how we can support the wider mission of the organization. So we have different capabilities, and we developed actually a wide range of of tools, really from channel analysis, listening, benchmarking, perception survey, and also media, social media monitoring. And it was really about changing the culture of the organization to develop evidence-based communication, which mirror their evidence-based policies. And so we had to really accompany the team to fill strategic brief and understand what success looks like. So our target, policymakers, it's a complex ecosystem. It goes from government officials to also House representatives, but we also want to reach the junior member who will actually compile the info and produce the brief for senior policymakers. So that's a complex ecosystem that is often summarized by just the top level policymakers, but actually we have to go through a whole targeting. And so now I will focus on how we have leveraged those insights for one specific report, which is our Economic Outlook report. It's published 4 times per year, and it's economic forecast. And you've seen that we have developed an influence map to look at who will influence actually policymakers. So you can see academics, media, civil society, private sector. And so with that, we were able to list some opinion leaders that could help us to also reach our core target. We also looked at what are their preferred channels, and you see that OECD reports and publication come first in our ranking, but also newsletter, also data visualization, and that things that I think at the beginning in the organization, they were already focusing on long reports, and to be able to say that we need to accompany that by shorter content and in plain English, that was also a shift. So we built an action plan for this economic outlook, and we brought some differences in terms of the campaign we put in place. So we added a digital report, so you still have the long report for those that really want to dig into the forecast, but we put also a short summary of this. We have put some tracking links on our website to really show the power of newsletters that were sometimes maybe not leveraged with the capability that they have. And lastly, we really wanted to empower the teams in charge. And so we set up KPIs with them, but we also built some tailored dashboard for them so they could see in real time the data progressing. And we meet every week with them to interpret the data, but it was important for us that they could track it in real time, and that we will be also accountable. So we created some dynamic scorecards based on those KPIs to look at the results and what went well and what we could learn from the data. So what were the results? So we have increased our reach, and so that was a good start, especially on the web, showing that actually even policymakers want short, snackable content. We managed to have a worldwide geographic reach, which is important for us as we have members across the globe. We also increased the satisfaction of the users by really onboarding lessons learned. And one point very important for us, it's to get coverage really on message. For us, it can be easy to have a lot of coverage on growth forecast, but to draw coverage more specifically on, for example, on some policy recommendation. So here we had some specific message around mass vaccination and the need for fiscal stimulus, and we were able to track across the media mention really the coverage and if it was on message. We also measure the influence by who mentioned us on social media, and do we manage to have high-level policymakers talking about our findings. And also we look at backlinks and we compare with peers institutions, trying to see which government website or academic website will link back to our content. And so here we saw also big improvement. So that's the presentation, and I would say that we are also facing new challenges ahead. I think it's still difficult to demonstrate really the value of communication and PR for us, while acknowledging that we cannot do all this alone. Also measure the long-term qualitative impact, and how do you measure what you cannot count easily and go beyond quantitative. And I would say that disinformation, misinformation, that's a key concern for us, as it can erode the trust in experts, and we need to be equipped to really monitor this and face those challenges as they arise. And that's it. I will finish by thanking my team, who's represented by these small icons, and I'm open to your questions.
That was excellent and very eye-opening, and I think I'm not the only person that sits in awe of how our not-for-profit members do so much, especially when they say, and we have no funding, or we have limited funding, this is how we have our funding, and it's amazing. Thank you so much. And as Camille said, we have a triumvirate, if you will, who leads our not-for-profit special interest group, and that is Michelle Hawkins of NATO, who helped us get Rebecca to speak in the on-demand session, and Jose de Buerba of the World Bank. And this group is truly an amazing community, and it's one of the reasons that many of our members will sponsor a member of the not-for-profit community, because they have just a way of sharing and of being together and of making one another better and challenging each other that is lightning in a bottle. And I would just encourage you to all, if you have a not-for-profit member, you can sponsor them to become a member and then be part of the not-for-profit group. And I think that what you'll find is they just get better. You'll get better questions from your clients. You get better ask. It makes your product and your services better too. And it is really amazing. And so thank you, and Michelle and Jose, for all of your work that you guys do there. And when you come back and then you present this and you win awards by doing this, I think it inspires everyone, not just the not-for-profit community, but especially them, to see, hey, we can do this. We don't have to have some huge budget to do this, to be really smart and to be strategic. So thank you for your leadership in that, to really show people that everything is possible.
Thanks a lot.
To show accomplishments.
Thank you.
Yeah. We want to open it up to questions for Camille. We have a couple of minutes, so I'll open those up. I will give the first question to Maya. I will defer and give my first question to Maya.
But maybe it's not going to be the same question. Risk is on you. Okay, so Camille, it was fantastic, really interesting presentation. And obviously in organizations which have more of a corporate perspective and like actual business objectives, we commonly have the challenge to calculate what's the PR attribution to certain organizational effects. And when your organizational effects are ultimately policy impact, and there are many other stakeholders trying to affect policy, some of them might try to affect the same direction. Have you ever been faced with a theoretical question? How can you attribute your own work and your organization's work to certain policy outcome?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, because policy impact, it's multi-factor. You have the environment, you have also, what happens. Sometimes you have some crises, sometimes you have new development that will push members to a consensus, and it cannot be attributed only to communication. But what we see is that when there is also an issue that is raising in the public debate, and we see the informed citizen really talking about key issues, we see that policymakers will put that at the core of their agenda. So that's why we work also with civil societies, with different organizations, to really take those key issues. We mentioned, environment, but there is also the rise of inequalities, many topics where we see that we can, with civil society, with informed citizen, really raise the profile of those issues.
Thank you, Maya. That's a good question. Do we have another question from the audience? I don't want to be selfish. Okay, then I will take the next question if you don't mind. So much of the challenge of some organizations is the getting started, right? What does that process look like for you? Not so much for getting started, but as you're looking to make a change or a shift in data, what is that, conversion point for your executives to really say, no, this is a part of the strategy that we need to be measuring effectively, and this is how we're going to do it? What is that process for you?
Yes, I think at the beginning, the impact measurement, or it was really just a media review, just citations in the media, and to really take it to the next level and have a more comprehensive understanding. I think what helps us actually, it's the lack of resources, the fact that you need to be smarter to understand better what's going on. And so that's why it was decided to invest in those capabilities to really leverage our traction. So from a constraint, we managed to actually turn it into a good opportunity for measurement.
From a theory of constraint to success story, who can ask for more, right? But I think that, it is so pointed, and it's so important to look at that, because when organizations are faced with that challenge, we're talking about the next normals, communicators at the data table, and there is a trust and a credibility that has to come from that. So do you face any obstacles or any challenges internally about the sourcing of your data? We've talked a lot about ethical data. We've talked a lot about that. What are some of those conversations internally that you see, or that you see on the horizon potentially with some of these new laws coming forward?
Yes, these are some challenges, and I think we are also, talking to non-communication experts, and there are more, I would say, economists or researchers or academics. So we have to be very solid on the data side, because they will question a lot, and we have also to be very compliant as a public organization. So we spend a lot of time actually building the process and thinking about what we can do and cannot do to make sure we are on the right track.
And what is that, during the session of the Tech Hub today, that Johnny Bentwood talked about the implementation, and he said his implementation is 3 years. What is an implementation cycle like at the OECD?
I would say it can be longer, because policy impact can take times. So we have some I would say some midpoint of progress. But when we look at policy impact, we cannot say, okay, in the next 6 months after the campaign, we'll get these laws voted or this change. So we have to look at a longer horizon, but that's why I think it's useful also to have indicators that can measure that we are progressing and not being in the dark.
I think that's so well said and so important for some people in this audience to understand as they're coming to you and trying to talk about how to partner with you. If you're right in the middle of a cycle, that's not a time when you can take on something new with bandwidth, with resources, with everything else. And so, allowing them to plan accordingly is such an important piece to then foster good partnerships.
And we talked also this morning about procurement, and it's pretty long. But I would say keep on. At the end, we manage to get on board, new providers. But it can be, yes, you have to have perseverance.
No, and that's the key to unlocking a successful relationship. Sometimes, right? Is that there is the appetite, there is the acumen for it. It's just a matter of making it work and working through the process that you have in place. So, one last chance for a question for Camille Phil Lynch, set your hand up. Wait for a microphone, please. Thank you.
When OECD is thinking about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, given the sensitivities of some of the things that you discuss and the ramifications, and to Maya's point about the number of stakeholders who are very powerful agencies in their own right, are you often... Is there ever an attempt to maybe, for governments, other international agencies, to influence your messaging, to be part of your narrative?
So I would say that we serve our member countries, but in terms of communication, so we based our communication really on our findings. We take the time to build a consensus, but for communication, we need also to be very agile. And so that's something that gives us also a bit more flexibility to communicate and to go out and to also make sure that what we say is understandable, because we can be caught in our own jargon. And I think one of the roles that we have is to bring the external voices inside the organization, because you tend to look really at your reports, the different stakeholders, and we need to make sure that we are also aware of what's being said out there. And so that's where the listening part is key, I think.
Thank you for that excellent question, Phil, and thank you for that response. I think that's so pointed of the paradigm where you are, is that your process sometimes might feel painstaking, but at the same time, your team has to be incredibly agile, even navigating that. So thank you so much, Camille. What an excellent presentation. Please, another round of applause for Camille.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
And maybe I will ask my other non-for-profit colleagues to stand up, to also acknowledge them. We have a lot of them, so if we can applaud them. That's... Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.